Welcome to the level 100 training on Rollup 32. My name is Holger Tangermann. Most of you already know me from, well, internally or from the previous partner trainings which we gave to you, also from Rollup 31, etc. I'm not alone. With me is my better side, Vera.
Hello. That's me.
Yeah, that's you. And we are really thrilled to give you not one but two roll-ups this December to you. We will come to it in a minute why we have two roll-ups. Just be aware that today is level 100 training, meaning it is an introduction to the new roll-up from the view of an HR user, while tomorrow, level 200, we will change the view a bit and deal with the Rollup 32 as an admin or an implementation partner, so that you know further what to install, where to install, what to configure concerning Rollup 32. As mentioned, we will have a double release. We will have a release called Rollup 31.2 and a rollup which is called Rollup 32. And while Rollup 31.2 is focused on the replacement door locks, we did huge and massive changes on Rollup 32 concerning the time and attendance. We had one big goal to make work more flexible and also have it built in our system that you can create work patterns more flexible, that you can apply shifts more flexible, and overall to make it easy, not only to configure, but also as an HR manager to administrate complicated legal or even contractual work patterns there. Today, we will have a general topic on changes on the Microsoft platform, CDS, and what it brings for us. Then I will introduce you to Rollup 31.2, then Rollup 32 with all the new features. We will talk about a team member app, and in the end, as you know it, in this level 100 training, we have a list of product fixes. We decided that we have the two releases for one reason only. Microsoft is enforcing us to use the new unified interface, and with this enforcement, and I think we all agree that the unified interface has huge benefits. We all love it. It's easier to use. Of course, here and there are minor gaps, but Microsoft will fill them from time to time. And one of this gap will be introduced. It is that the process dialogues, which we use in our HR solution, which was a functionality of the legacy. The legacy platform will no longer be there. This will be rolled out by Microsoft on the weekend starting in Europe from the 8th of January. As you know from the partner newsletter and from the customer newsletter, that this is a reason why it's absolutely key to update the customer to our newest rollup, because we have dialogues in there which the customer needs. For example, replacing the contract, changing and adapting leave requests. The good thing is we have a solution. This solution is Rollup 31.2. As we know that most of you test our rollups intensively and are trying to find all the bugs and try to align it with your customer systems as you might done customizations. We said that Rollup 32 might be too late in order for you to do it. That's why we took Rollup 31, which you already tested, already implemented, already know your ways around and know that your customization for your customer systems are already working. And we added the dialog replacements only. This is Rollup 31.2. So for you, you can faster test them and therefore faster implement them in the customer systems than if you would test all the Rollup 32 benefits, features, and improvements. By the way, I did mention in the beginning that if you have any questions, please just lift your hand, ask right away, or use the chat. We will monitor everything quite closely, and as soon as we are finished with one step in the training, we will get back to that and answer them immediately. So, the release schedule. Rollup 31.2 is already released, as you see. We had a beta on the 18th November and the final release on the 30th of November. So if you go to the customer portal of ours and download the solution, you will immediately get Rollup 31.2. Please be aware that on the technical note, the version number, if you are importing it with the package deployer, is in fact Rollup 32.0008. This is Rollup 31.2. It has a version number already of Rollup 32, but it is Rollup 31.2. Please don't be confused by it. Rollup 32 is already in the release candidate state, and you can download the release candidate state as you all know in the partner hub. When you go to the partner hub, go to R&D, you will find the release candidate down here, and you can download it as a zip folder. Please be aware that also this time not to just import the zip file, but use the package deployer, which is in there as well. Yeah. Therefore, you are definitely sure that all the fields which you might not filled but are now mandatory or haven't been filled before and might have some use now are filled accordingly. And that the base data, of course, is up to date. As I mentioned, the dialog replacement we will base on two technology. We created our own technology, and we use Power Automate for some other flows. It's depending on the dialogues which we are trying to replace. Yeah. I will go and jump into the system and show you the different types now. As you see here, I'm testing, and you probably are key on how did we replace it. So for this, let's go to the employees, open one of the employees. Let's go with Abel Tanya. And something you will miss immediately is the dialog, start dialog up here. It's no longer there. As it was in the legacy interface. Also, the button on change department is no longer up here. It is now down there. Yeah. So directly next to the department, you can change it by clicking on it. As some of the more technical people in the audience might already know, this is a PCF. Yes, we are using a PCF there. And also we are triggering a web resource in the background in order to make this visible. Please keep in mind that also we have to take care of the translation. So if we have it in French or German as well, it is still the same web resource. So this is key for all of us. So it's now just easy, just like the old dialogues, but faster. You can choose, hey, I want to go in Honag, Germany Consulting as a new employee, as a new department. Click next. And you get a message, hey, completely successful. And now if you go back, quickly refresh, you will see that it has changed. If an HR manager would be filtered. So we have this dialogues. 3 of them on the digital personal file, but we have also dialogues if it comes to wages. And these dialogues are not individual triggered on one record, but they are triggered across of more than one records. For example, the copy wage dialog or the generate of payments dialog. You see here, these are still web resources, but triggered in the ribbon. So if you click on them, you will have the same experience if you have or had with the dialog. The window is bigger. It's actually, more beautiful, I believe. You can just put in the sun and hit next, and you still and also get the response that it was completely successful. Yeah. And the third type of dialogues we introduced already with Rollup 31 are the dialogues which we replaced with the Power Automate. For example, on the departments, we trigger flows now instead of dialogues. We will have a flow which is called rollup or rollout of leave entitlements, and we have another flow called carried forward, which you can just trigger as you are used to from here. The only difference is there is no extra button in the ribbon, but a flow instead. As some of you already realized, having the buttons on the form can lead to a couple of challenges for your customers. Also, these challenges are good to get back to the customer, talk to them, maybe sell them some additional stuff, but mainly to improve their user experience. You need, if you updated the form, just an example of a customer lifetime circle, we will start with the original hard drive form. Then, if we are talking about the digital personal file, you customize the form. For example, you hide or take from the form the suffix field, you don't like the department field, you don't want a cost center there, or you even add new fields. So then you know that the solution layer will be your customized form, and instead of our original form, your customized form will be visible to all of the users. After you update to Rollup 31.2, 32, or even higher, you will see immediately the buttons to trigger the dialog replacements, the PCFs, on the form. But as soon as you re-import your custom solution will be the highest solution layer, so it will be the visible form. The dialog replacements are not part of your customized form as they haven't been there before. So you need to put them in, meaning that you choose which dialog your customer is using, consult with him, and then make sure that he can exit it by moving the dialog replacement, the button on the form. How to implement the PCF and the button on your customized form is something we will focus on tomorrow's Rollup 32 level 200 training. So don't worry, we will show you everything. It is a small fix, doesn't take too long, but it's easy to align your customized form also with the benefits of the new dialog replacements. When we show you this, you might have an idea if you have custom dialogues already that you maybe go down the same road on replace your own custom dialogues in the same form to have a generic user experience that they always go with the same. A list of dialogues we have replaced. As you see in here, we are focusing on our HR solution. For partners who have still customers with our project management solution, don't worry, the dialogues are replaced there as well, but we didn't had a lot of dialogues there anyway. So let's go quickly through it. Most of them are in the HR hub area and are replaced by the new dialogue technology, which means a PCF to trigger as a button and a web resource in the background, which is then doing the action itself. So we have the modify and add leave request, which are now on the forms of the leave request and the employee. Inside the employment term, you will see in a couple of minutes as well the replacement of active employment terms, as well as the end of set end date of employment. We have the copy of wages, January wages, and the CV passing replaced in the ribbons. So this is still in the ribbons, same as extend wage. The dialog for the Sing integration is replaced and is now in the settings on the recruiting channel. In the ribbon in the entity recruiting channel in Sing. Recalculate leave entities and recalculate payment summaries are done via the hard drive support, and also recalculate the payment summaries on the tab, which we already showed you. Set employment terms end date, we already spoke about. For the Stepstone integration, the same goes as for the Sing. The WeWork template project on the onboarding is now on the onboarding form. Upload licenses is, as you can remember it, still in the ribbon. And then we have a couple of flows. Most of them are concerned about the year end and what to do with the leave entitlement. So carry them forward, one apartment-based, one employment-based, employee-based, and the next one is a rollout and has the same conditions. If you have any questions, do we have to reapply any licenses as part of? Okay, Gareth asked if we have to reapply any licenses. As part of these updates, no, licenses which are already in the system and are valid don't have to be reapplied. But if you get a new license key from our end, you now have the chance to use the new dialogues. And now we get to the biggest part of this training is the Rollup 32, and with Rollup 32 we will have some really good and cool features in time and attendance. Focus on that area. Features some of you waited for some time now, and we finally constructed them, and our R&D department, some of them are here, did a great job on composing them to a solution which is giving us a lot of possibilities to configure all the different work patterns, all the different time buckets which are out there in the world, by making it still easy to do so. So thank you to our R&D department, led by August Hoxer. As you saw earlier, Rollup 32 is still in RC stage, meaning it is published in the Partner Hub, and you can download it, can test it, and we would like to have as much feedback as possible. Please use this time the Rollup tickets at hubdrive.com, which goes directly to our partner and project management. They will take a look at all the things which are come in. Either it is maybe you found a bug, possible but unlikely, or if it is another improvement which you like to have in the solution, please use a Rollup ticket at hubdrive. So, but now it's time to hand over to Vera.
Thank you, Holger. First of all, a wonderful good morning to everyone in the meeting. I hope you are having a great start into the day. And so I'm excited to introduce to you the functionalities that we are adding with the Rollup 32 this time. So as Holger said, this is going to be focused on the time and attendance. And as you can see on the work patterns, Rollup 32 now enables flexible working time, such as irregular shifts or irregular work times. This provides a more flexible working time planning. And of course, this is useful for apprentices in a company, for working students, if you have seasonal workers or shift workers, if the company or 4-shift system or 5, if you will. Now we added a new functionality where you can plan in advance the work patterns for your employees. And so taking a look in how this was added into the system, you see that, I would say that right now the daily summary will be for all of the attendance related information. As usual, we have the columns with allocated times, leave hours attended, and so on. But what we added here was a new entity in the settings called work patterns, or in this case, work pattern templates. So following the usual procedure, we first create a template and then we can apply the template to the employee. So in the template, as usual, you provide a name to the record. In the recurrence, you can set if this is a pattern sequence or if this is a pattern that repeats yearly, meaning you can do the plan for the whole year, if you will. There is no limit there. And in regards to the pattern first day, very important the first day that you choose, because let's say if you choose Monday here, and if you select then at the stage the date starting, so let's say if the 1st of January starts actually on a Tuesday, but your work pattern template has the pattern first day Monday, then the system is going to take the Monday and not the day that you selected on the calendar. So with the pattern first day, you can define exactly what is the first day of the pattern, because it could be any other day. It could even be a Saturday or a Sunday, if that's how the work pattern works. And then what matters is here on the right side when you define the days of that pattern. Don't confuse the days with the days of the month. This is actually the days of the pattern, so you can have from 1 and even adding more and more. So if your pattern first day, this would be the Monday, then Tuesday. You can skip days as you go. And of course, you can add shifts. So we have a more flexible functionality there when it comes to shifts. You can say which shift is going to be used on that specific day of the pattern. And the system is going to always let you know if the working hours that you set, if the amount makes sense based on how you set the shift earlier in your HR settings. After the work pattern template is completed, after you did all of the planning, you would need to go to the HR hub, to the main entity called work patterns. There we go, right under the employment terms. And then you simply apply the work pattern that you created to an employment term. Like I said, take attention to the start date. This is different from the first day of the pattern. So if you select Tuesday, then is going to actually be counting will be the following Monday, the 11th in this case. We have the usual recurrence if this is something that happens every year or on the sequence of the pattern that you set. And again, we get the first day. We also give backward compatibility for the existing customers, meaning if they don't want to use these work patterns when setting up a contract, they get the option to choose if they want to have the existing working hours or if they would like to use the work pattern instead. There we go. After the template is applied, the same is going to be applied to the work pattern of the employment term of the employee. Working hours are still there, meaning all of these existing customers that use the working hours, they don't lose this functionality. But right now we have the option whether they would like to continue with the functionality that we had already, which is not as flexible. However, now we enable more and more flexibility there for the hours planning, including this wonderful, in my opinion, new entity called work patterns.
Another new feature which we have is called time accounts. Time accounts or time buckets, both names are right with us. Officially in the product it will call time account, will enable us to have multiple of them. You all know already one time account which we had in our product for a long time now. And this product...
Yeah. I raised my hand for the previous topic.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bharat.
Okay. Right. So I have a question which I have posted. So the customers who are currently using the employment terms, right? So what happens? The system looks into the holiday calendar, and then it gives preference for the work timing, that what work hours that you have set in the employment term, right? In future, can they leave this blank and just completely rely on the work patterns?
Yes.
So then the system will consider the work patterns and not the work hours.
Yes. So if the work patterns are always enabled for a certain time period, as you can see in the contract or in the employment term, you give a start and an end date of the work pattern. During that period, during that valid period, this work pattern is valid. If you align that valid period with the employment term period, you don't have the need to fill work hours anyway. But if you have an employment term and you have a work pattern maybe for half a year, like Kurzarbeit, where you actually have a valid work contract, but for a certain period, your work hours will change and adapt. Then you can use work pattern and say, okay, for the next 6 months, you work only 50% of that time. And after that period, the contract is still valid and it goes back to the working hours. Or you add another work pattern for the period after that. So it gives you that flexibility that if an employee for a certain period works differently, that you can manage to implement this in the employment term without always having to replace the whole contract. Because back in the old days of Rollup 30 and 31, we still had that once work hours have changed, we always needed to replace the whole contract, which is no longer necessary. Now we can have work patterns for a certain period or different work patterns for multiple periods, and without having to replace it. This also gives us the option for seasonal work in construction, for example, where we have if you will, a yearly recurrent work pattern, which is depending highly on the weather and the conditions outside. Does this answer your question, Bharat?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So if a customer wants to change the core work hours, right, which is set in the employment term that is valid, then it requires to change the employment term?
Yeah, it still does.
Okay, meaning that we have to change the employment term if the core hours change?
If the core hours change, but most of our existing customer will go a different direction. They will just add a new work pattern starting from tomorrow or last week for the future and don't set an end date, because you're not required to, when you add a new work pattern, to send an end date.
Okay, I missed the screen. Can it be done for future?
Yes.
Okay, so I can decide now that my employees will be working starting, let's say, sometime in next year in certain patterns.
Yeah, it's for all flexible thing. Another reason why we implemented it was Auszubildende, yeah, apprenticeships, where they have to go to school for half a year on Monday and Tuesdays, but the next half a year is on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Okay.
We didn't want to replace the whole employment term every half year, but we wanted to give them the flexibility to change the work hours in those terms. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Also for especially the British market, we implemented something that we can have a recurrence depending on the length you have. For example, if you have a 3-week cycle of you work 4 days, then you go on break 3 days, and you work 4 days, etc. You can build this in the work pattern, and even better in the work pattern template, and assign it to multiple employment terms, and for that period it's valid. Marco, you...
Yeah, so Marco's question, what is the leading number, the work hours or the work pattern, especially for time and attendance, for example, daily summaries and etc. If it is okay, Holger, let me just quickly share my screen again. I think maybe I was too quick in showing the option there that we have. So, and I think this will also answer most of the questions. So when I said that this is something that can be enabled if the customer wants, there is this button here on the employment enable work pattern, yes or no. So once you enable the work pattern, this is going to be the leading amount to be taken. If you keep it as no, then the work hours are going to be taken instead. Okay. Does that answer the question, Marco?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so but this looks like there's no going back, right? So it's locks and it doesn't allow you to switch off the work pattern again.
Well, it goes back as long as the employment term is not valid. But we wanted to give our existing customers a chance to enable work patterns without having to replace all employment terms. So this is only for the case that it is valid. Yeah. If it's a new employment term, you can go forth and back as long as you want. But as soon as you set the contract or the employment term to valid, also the work patterns in that will be valid as well.
Okay, but you mentioned that to change the core work hours, it's not required, right? You don't have to change that employment term. So then they have to rely only on the work pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We expect that most of our existing customer will use the work patterns in the future. Mm-hmm. Always work hours only for stable contracts, where it's really 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for example. Absolutely, they would go with work hours as they used to, but even for them, it can be that for a certain period they have to work differently. And then you just switch, enable the work patterns, change the working hours, change the work patterns in there for a certain time period. And if that period is over, if the work pattern valid period ends, it will automatically go back and pull for the next common days the allocated hours from the original work hours.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other questions before we move on? I don't see a hand. Good. If you have additional questions at the end, we have another time slot for it, or just interrupt me. That is also always a good option.
Or interrupt me.
I would prefer that. So time accounts or time buckets. As I mentioned, you're already aware of one time account or time bucket which we had for a long period now. This is the overtime. The overtime, which is created from the daily summaries, and therefore coming from the daily summaries is automatically creating a leave entitlement of a type overtime as well, so that employees can go and take time off from absence type overtime. This was always a strictly direct connection, meaning if on the daily summaries you have an hour of overtime, you will get a leave entitlement of 1 hour. We've learned over the past years that there are different overtime regulations in different countries, as well as in different companies, as well inside of different companies. There might be different contract types or employment types, which made it necessary to have a more detailed look. For example, one of the things we've always been asked, is there a threshold that maybe if you work 15 minutes of overtime each day, do the 15-minute counts? Shall there really be a leave entitlement created for them or not? Or some companies have a weekly collection period, meaning they don't get it on a daily basis leave entitlement, but rather on the week. And what we also heard is that maybe you gather a lot of overtime, but you're not allowed to take more than a certain amount of this overtime to a next period. And this is what we came up with. So the goal is to make it more flexible, more configurable, and we created an entity called time account and time account configuration. And this time account configuration will be added to the employment term as well. So the good news is it's completely individual, meaning one employee can have it, the other one can't, and even one employee can have it for a certain period. The employment term is actually valid, and when he moves positions, he might no longer have this overtime or this time bucket regulations. The other thing which we are focused on is to make it not only an overtime, but also have different types of overtime. For example, in Switzerland, Überzeit and Überstunden, so overtime and over hours is a difference. You get over hours, Überstunden, till a certain amount, from 40 to 45 hours a week. So not daily calculation, weekly calculation. And everything from 45 to 50 or even above is called Überzeit, over time. So two different time accounts, different time buckets are required because they are handled differently. One part you are allowed to take into the next period. For the other part, you are not allowed to have them have only a certain amount till it is cut off. Maybe they are calculated differently, even that one is maybe calculated on a daily and one on a weekly basis. So this is also possible. The next challenge which we took on with this time account is that it might not be only overtime over hours. So everything which is exceeding your allocated hours, but it might be also a time account for night work, also a time account for weekend work, maybe for traveling time. We created a general configuration possibility to create leave entitlement based on any fields on the daily summary. So completely up to you. every field of the daily summary, we can create a leave entitlement from it now based on a configuration which we should have. Down in the graphic, you see that we still go on the allocated hours, and then we can have thresholds. The threshold is that, for example, if you're 5 minutes late, we got stories that, hey, our workers, they are going for coffee before they leave, just to exceed a certain amount. This you can now prevent to put a threshold in there that the first 10 minutes, that's the first 15, 20 minutes, however you want to define it, is not calculated into the overtime at all, or into this account, however you like to call it, at all. This is not only possible on the daily, but also on different collection period. For example, if you have in a contract that 5 overtime hours each week are included, you can now define this in the threshold. So only time which is exceeding the 5 hours, exceeding the threshold, will lead into a leave entitlement creation. Also, we can set limits of the maximum accumulation, also based on the same collection period. So daily, weekly, monthly, theoretically yearly is possible, but we have yearly anyway, as we then have to carry forward the leave entitlement to a new period. How does it look like in this system? It looks like this. This entity is called time account configuration. There's also a template configuration which you can attach to an employment terms template, and once you create an employment term, it will automatically be also pulled from the employment terms template. In here, you can define which of the daily summary fields are taken care of. And as you see, there is even mandatory break minutes in there, but also approved hours, working hours, leave hours, off-site work, so Dienstgang. All of these hours and minutes can be taken into the consideration, and you can choose from them. You can then set the maximum of it, so how much can be accumulate per period. 5, then you can choose the time if you want to say, if you want to have this calculation based on minutes or hours. We can choose the collection period, as mentioned, daily, weekly, monthly is possible. Yearly is already part of our carried forward process. Let's choose a weekly process. We can then define which absence type is created, based on this configuration, which we are now doing, based on this field, which of the absence type will be created. If you have custom absence types, you can add them, and it will work just by adding the global option set. And then, as you see, they will be added to an employment term, and a time account configuration template is where they can pull it off. Down there, we also have the threshold in minutes and the threshold period. So things which are not considered. Remember the first 15 minutes, I took it as an example, and I can choose something differently. Because what we figured, the collection period where the calculation is happening, maybe weekly, maybe months, doesn't need to be the period of the threshold. For example, we have customers who like to define that the first 15 minutes of each day doesn't take into consideration of the calculation at all. And then we have customers who say, hey, the first 2 hours are included in the contract, as I mentioned. So here you can choose a different time unit than up here. For example, you can choose daily, or you align it with the collection period. And include threshold in the accumulation is a yes and no field. What does that mean? It means that if someone would exceed this threshold line with his working hours, is the overtime or the time account now calculated from the difference from the allocated hours till that point, or just from the threshold till that point? So is it an hour 15 or is it 15, which is taken into account? This you can configure with this yes and no field. And then you save it and assign it to the employment term, and it will automatically be considered during the time period where the employment term is valid. Okay. Let me check on you if there are any questions, because that was a lot.
Okay.
No questions there?
No questions.
Okay, then let's move on.
Let's move on. So related to all of this that we've just shown, Rollup 32 offers more flexibility on the daily summaries. So now we added the option to override the allocated hours manually for, again, a more flexible planning of the working hours. In the past, the allocated hours have been locked or fixed, and they were pulled on multiple triggers from the employment terms. But now with Rollup 32, we get the option to override them on the daily summaries form. You get an option, override allocated hours, yes or no. Once it's set to yes, if there was, let's say, a number before, an 8, for example, you can simply enter the correct number instead. Yeah, so much more flexibility than before.
Before that question comes up, let me shortly add, back in the old days, it always, for each recalculation, so a new attendance created, a new leave request created, it always went back, looked at the working hours, and then updated the allocated hours again. So with the yes/no field, you protect from recalculation the allocated hours that they are pre-filled again with the old number.
So yeah, a rather short explanation, which I hope was clear enough. More flexibility there. And then moving on, additional to the DataFox terminals that we have always supported, now we also have Dormakaba integrated with our solution. This Dormakaba integration is handled by flows, which trigger on the HTTP request. After the flows are enabled in the system, an URL will be generated for each one of the flows. These URLs then need to be shared with Dormakaba externally. Note that the user that is used for the connection with CDS or Dataverse, in the flow, there should be an admin user who has access to create or delete access groups. So if we sparkle your interest on Dormakaba integration, if you have any further questions on how to get this integrated in your system with Rollup 32, please get back to us and we will happily assist you there. Moving on, another improvement from our end on Rollup 32. Now we have better improved error messages when it comes to the attendance. So a new global option set is added now. This was created, this was actually used already in the attendance detail. So we did have comments set until now in the attendance detail in the cases when there was a correction required status, for example. Right now we have many more options there for the error messages, which give you a better understanding of what went wrong at a certain action. So for example, when the employee is working, despite he's actually on leave that day, we have a set of error messages that will pop up in English language, German language, and French language. As usual, our supported languages. Then some other error messages as well. So if the employee has allocated hours, but he didn't do any time bookings for that day, this is also going to be shown in the near future on the attendance detail and on the daily summaries as well. Another improvement, the duration of the leave request now is possible for more 2 fiscal years. This is again improved usability of our leave request function and time and attendance, more flexibility for the examples of sabbatical leave that lasts longer than a year or parental leave and so on. Now you can request over 2 fiscal years for those absences. As usual, at the end, a short list of the solved customer cases.
Okay. These are just the most important ones. So we solved with a new feature which was introduced just by Vera, that the attendance details of the type End work is automatically created when the employee is forgetting to punch out. We used to have this, it didn't work in a couple of rollups now, and it is fixed now together with all the other new error messages which were introduced on the attendance details. The leave calculation rounding up or down was a ticket about that if someone is starting on the 1st of January and you had the rounding configured, that it might happen that someone is ending up with more errors, more leave entitlements than his contract already or actually stated. This is also solved with Rollup 31.2 already, and there was a business process error, and this is also solved. And now it's time for you. If you have any question, we are happy to answer everything. Also, let me remind you that tomorrow we have the level 200 training for all the administrators and project and partner managers in the audience. And but please feel free to ask every question